This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 8th of March 2023 at home in Wicklow, and it is a movie focused episode where I look at a couple of movies I consider mediocre, some mediocre but still very watchable, others mediocre and not to be revisited. And I put them up in opposition against a couple of singular talents, singular cinematic storytellers who approach movie making very differently and whose personal vision of humanity couldn't be more different, I suppose. So yeah, I get into that, and I was massively on the clock when I recorded, so I kind of had to rush the ending. I don't like apologizing for what I put into the episode, but I felt the sting of I wish I'd had more time, and I wanted to expound more on one of those filmmakers in particular. But there'll be other chances, so that might be for a future date. I also talk at the start of the episode, I just kind of have a bit of a wrap up of my experience recently back on stage working on Manifest, the theatre production from Broken Talkers. So I talk a bit about that at the beginning of the episode as well. And there was something else after that and before the movie stuff. It might have been swimming, pet drama at home, stuff like that. Okay, so that's what's coming up. I hope you enjoy what you hear, and yeah, I'll see you around the corner. Cheers.
Ooh, not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind. Keep my mojo.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. How's this week going for you? How's this moment going for you? Check in, and proceed. You'll just have to get on with whatever state you're in anyway. You've no choice. But always worth checking in, just to see if you can embrace that moment of mindfulness and take stock. It's just a flash, isn't it? Almost like a flash photograph going off in a dark room and things are illuminated. Poof! And then you can see what you're left with. How does that feel? Did you see something horrific? Something grotesque? Something beautiful? Something that made you feel very well? Or the opposite? Yes. Anyway, listen, I'm going to have to dive right in because for various reasons I am monstrously on the clock. So I'm probably, this might be around the hour mark, this episode. A blessed relief to some of you. And it's going to be it's going to be movie focused today. So that's great for those of you who enjoy hearing about movies and thinking about movies you've seen or have yet to see. So I'm going to get into that shortly. But just to very quickly wrap up my experience with Manifest, the Broken Talkers theatre production that I just finished last Saturday night after basically a 2-month commitment in terms of rehearsals and performance. It was just a bit of a whirlwind and a really, really, really enjoyable experience. A lot of good memories, and I'm still feeling the the after effects, the afterglow, if you will. It was a really good experience, and the show played to packed houses every night. Granted, not a huge space, but that's okay. There was still huge demand for tickets. It sold out almost immediately, and I managed to get a few people in to see it, which was nice. But even if they hadn't, it was a good show. It was a good piece of work, and some very sort of honest performances brought into the work. And as I'd mentioned before at different times during this process, just some good men involved, and it was very much focused on men's issues, masculinity, and particularly what young boys face growing up, and the models that they face, the models of masculinity that they're exposed to, some dubious messaging. I mean, I've addressed this explicitly in recent episodes, and again, I know I'm repeating myself, but this production was part of a larger community arts project that started about 4 years ago, with Rialto Youth Project, Broken Talkers Theatre Company, and Fiona Whelan, the artist. And basically they began this process of trying to find a structure, a workshop structure that would help them engage with young men in their communities, and to help them engage with the idea of masculinity and how they understand the state of masculinity via their own experience. And I was involved in an iteration of those workshops over a year ago, which I really enjoyed, and sadly I wasn't able to continue it because of a sudden cessation of funding. But the signs are looking good for me to start with another youth group in the same part of Dublin. I'm hoping that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, and I'll be able to bring that to completion. And that project is called What Does He Need? And the play was a theatrical representation of that work, and I think it was very successful in terms of where it came from and how it expressed the essential findings, and the kind of how it expressed the essential sort of challenges and dilemmas that the work comes face to face with, and that work is continuing, which is exciting. So yeah, all of that is just to say I'm grateful, I suppose. I'm grateful to Phelim and Gary at Broken Talkers, Fiona Whelan, and Rialto Youth Project for kind of getting that whole thing going and inviting me on board. And yeah, it was lovely just to do a bit of acting again for the first time in a long time. Yeah, I really had a great time and really enjoyed working with the guys involved. So wasn't that nice for me? And now life goes on post the show, and I'm trying to see what that configuration might look like. One thing I don't talk about much, or haven't spoken about much on the podcast, is the writing side of what? The writing side of the clear out, the writing side of me. I'd like to talk about the writing side of me. And I have the stirrings of a larger written project I think I want to start. I'm not sure what that would look like, whether that would be the stuff of a book, of a memoir, of a piece of auto-fiction. Yeah. At one point I thought I might try and collate the various pieces I put up on the blog, on the website over 8 or 9 years, whatever it was. But I think I'd like to approach something completely new and see if I could sustain it for a proper book-sized amount of work. Anyway, I speak tentatively because I find I'm quite daunted by that in prospect. but I've never really challenged myself to do it. So that is something I may start quietly working on. I'll keep you updated. I'm sure you're waiting with bated breath. Oh Jesus, did he write anything? Anyway, I'll return to that another time if there's anything to say. Otherwise, one of the things that's very high on my list is the completion, and it's kind of in my court at the moment, is the sort of the final bits and pieces to bring the Clear Out website back to life. So my friend Daniel, hola Daniel, ¿qué tal? My friend Daniel has worked diligently on that and continues to help me with my branding and some Insta posts and stuff. Daniel's done a lot of work to get that website up and running, and I've just got to go in behind the scenes and just do some logistical crap, which I'm not relishing, but it has to be done, and then we can get that website up, which will be a chance then for the website to be the sort of one-stop shop for everything connected to the podcast, and it'll have the archive of blog pieces, which are fundamentally little essays, little think pieces, little bits of personal testimony, and also some of my poetry and some short stories and the photographs that go with those. So y'alls, and obviously the podcast archives will be there as well. So this, I think, is episode 94. So I think, I'd like to think that the website will be live before we hit episode 100. But you never know. That's only 6 weeks away, so who knows. Okay, so what else before I get into the movie stuff? What else? Spring. Spring is springing. I gathered a load of daffodils yesterday. Passed an abundance of daffodils, and I helped myself to a bunch to bring home to the household, to bring home to #blessed, to present to my wife. So I did that. They're nice, and they actually smell lovely. So these are the first spring daffodils. They look fabulous. See some nice cherry blossom around as well. So that's all happening. And while that's happening, we're having a little bitey cold spell. And snow is forecast. There was a flurry earlier today. We'll wait and see if we get more. There's nothing more over the next couple of days. I wouldn't mind a little drop. But I need to get out in the car on Friday morning, so I'm hoping there's not too much. I had a swim yesterday. If you follow my extraordinarily cool social media stuff, disclaimer, not extraordinarily cool at all. But if you do, you'll notice I had a swim yesterday, and yeah, it was bloody cold. I didn't check the temperature, but it felt like it was around the 7 degree mark. I mean, there's other things that affect the water temperature, or how it feels, and of course air temperature. Guess what? Air temperature is one of those factors. Wind chill is another one of those factors, and they were both present yesterday. So it was it was bloody cold, but always good. Always feel great on the other side, and I needed it. I needed it yesterday. I didn't do very well yesterday morning. I got very cross with the dog, and I'm sorry, animal lovers. I did give the dog a couple of whacks after, and I keep saying the dog. Pepper. I'm talking about Pepper. Beautiful little doggy. But poor old Pepper got a couple of clatters on the side of the head for chewing up my leather gloves. I know. And the only thing I can say in my defence, and it's not something I was proud of, and I felt very bad afterwards, and I've done my utmost to make up with the dog since. Pepper, sorry. Was it? I just walked into the room first thing in the morning with a bit of a grumpy head on me, and I saw the gloves, and I just sort of saw red, and yeah, it wasn't great. Anyway, we're all pals again, and I need to just keep an eye on that and not let it happen again, and just let things go. So yeah, not really thrilled with myself yesterday. I just felt the lingering kind of guilt and shame of that, because I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy. That's just, no. And also, you know, I let it go, but yeah, the swim was good. The swim was good as a circuit breaker, and the cold water, brilliant. Just that shock to the system, and to put myself in there and do it, very good for the head as always. Right, so what I wanted to talk about was just some movies that I've checked out recently, and just some things that have come up. So I suppose really what this discussion is going to be about, and it's not going to be, as I say, it's not going to be a long episode, but what the discussion essentially is going to be about, and I'm not going to stray too far afield in terms of my references. I'm going to try and keep it focused on the movies and the filmmakers in question. But essentially, I'm going to be talking about mediocrity in movie making and in movie storytelling versus excellence versus singularity of vision, and visionary filmmakers who have a distinctive singular voice. And just on the movies I've watched in the last couple of days, since I finished the show, I kind of had a craving just to catch up on some movie watching. These are the things that have come up for me. So where to begin? I think I'll begin with mediocrity, because it'll be more of a reward to go to things that are more exceptional and interesting. So I'd had it on my list to watch. I finally sat down the other night and watched CODA, which was an Oscar-winning movie from a couple of years ago. Not last year's Oscars, the previous year's Oscars. An actor from that movie won the Best Supporting Actor award. That's Troy Kotsur, won the Best Supporting Actor award. That movie, CODA, it's an acronym. It stands for Child of Deaf Adults, and it was directed by Sian Heder, I think. Yeah, Sian, Sian, S-I-A-N. How do you pronounce that name? Sian, Heder, or Heder, H-E-D-E-R. And a very simple story, really. It simply follows the travails of the daughter of deaf parents. She has a deaf brother as well. She's finishing up in high school, and they're a fishing family. Her father and her brother run a small fishing boat, and they're a very tight, close-knit family. And she's not deaf herself, and she is often the family spokesperson in public situations and in business transactions, because she can sign and understand everything her parents and brother says, and then she can translate for them or explain what they're saying when they're signing. And really the film is an exploration of, or follows this kind of particular moment in her life when she's coming to a sense of, I can't do this anymore. And one of the reasons she feels that is because her burgeoning love of music and singing is pulling her away from her family. And she has a rather over-the-top music teacher who encourages her to sing more and to apply for one of the Ivy League colleges. And that's basically it. It's that's the kind of the plot device that brings in the tension, to see, what's she going to do? Is she going to stick with her family, or is she going to trust that they can survive without her and follow her own kind of dream? And it's absolutely it's absolutely fine. The movie is fine. It is completely... And I'm not trying to throw shade at this movie because it's got a huge heart. And the 4 actors who play the family are really, really good. And one of those actors is Marlee Matlin, who famously won an Oscar for, was it Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress, for Children of a Lesser God back in the early 80s opposite William Hurt. She must have been very young then. I think she was in her mid-20s. And she's very good in this movie herself, and the aforementioned Troy Kotzer are the parents, and they're this very kind of in love, mother and father who are happy to jump into bed in the middle of the afternoon and have noisy sex, much to the excruciating embarrassment of her daughter when she brings a friend over to the house. And they're quite funny, but it feels real. It feels lived in. And I couldn't really fault those acting performances. And the actress playing the daughter is very good as well. I think Emilia Jones, was that it? Yeah, Emilia Jones. And the brother, who I can't remember his name. But they're all really solid. And Emilia Jones, we have to follow her. She's the protagonist, and she is an actress of great kind of charm and ease, and just has a nice natural way about her. And that's all fine. But ultimately, the story and the beats of the story are so extraordinarily unoriginal and hackneyed and have been done before that I just found myself kind of rolling my eyes a bit and going, oh Lord, really? The music teacher really took the cake. He was just this cliche of camp, over the top preciousness, smart alecky adult, showing the young ones how it's done. And that actor, he was in some movie a few years ago about some over the top comedy about a Mexican lover. Was it called The Latin Lover? Was that it? What the hell was his name? Good Lord. But yeah, kind of awful, really. But he was kind of the driving force motivating this, the daughter to break out and do her own thing. Until it all, I won't spoil it because maybe on the back of this review you might not want to see it. I tell you what though, the movie it's sustained by the sincerity and the sincerity and just kind of the decency of those characters that make up the family. There's something really nice there, and if it's just their chemistry, it works. And there's a love interest, and I was watching it and kind of going, oh yeah, this guy's grand. He's kind of, there's something about him that's kind of, again, quite likable and easy and believable. And then I was like, oh, oh, I said to myself, and that with a high-pitched squeak, it's a young Irish actor whose name is Ferdia Walsh-Pilo. Ferdia Pilo Walsh. It's a double barrel name, Walsh-Pilo, Ferdia Walsh-Pilo. And he was in, last week I was talking about John Carney's Once, that musical, low budget musical from 2006, 2007, that won the best song at the Oscars that year. And John Carney had another musical a few years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, called Sing Street, which I only saw it once. I thought it was really good. I really, really enjoyed it. And it was about a young kid in the 80s in a school in Dublin who just wanted to get a band going and play the music he really liked. And I know the actor Jack Rayner played to great effect, great comic effect, the experienced kind of dope smoking older brother in that, giving him guidance. He was very funny. I was impressed with that. But Ferdia Walsh-Pilo was the main guy in Sing Street. That is a movie you should check out if you haven't seen it. A very sweet, charming movie which captured something of the 1980s Irish school experience that still had shadows of Catholic repression and all that shite, certainly as personified by one of the priest teachers in a particularly unpleasant scene in that movie. But anyway, Ferdia Walsh-Pilo playing the love interest in CODA, and yeah, just nice, easy acting presence. So fair play to him. Go on, hup the lads, hup the Irish. But overall, the mediocrity of the film kind of just never quite let me get fully in, and the obviousness of the key story beats, particularly around kind of the music choices and stuff. I don't know what it was. It was just too on the nose, which for some reason, as I say that expression, I'm thinking of what was meant. The thing that I've heard and read that made the Rolling Stones great was that the rhythm section, which was basically Charlie Watts and I guess Bill Wyman, or who else played bass for the Stones? Was Ron Wood also bass? Or rhythm? Christ, I mean, I'm just showing my ignorance as usual. Maybe that should be the name of the podcast, Showing My Ignorance as Usual with Dara Clear. But anyway, what they say about the Stones and the rhythm section is that they're always just slightly out. Now, I might be misrepresenting this, and any musicians listening might go, "You idiot! That's not what it is." Like ever so slightly behind, which I guess creates this kind of vibration musically, or how we receive it. It gives it that kind of edge. So there's a slight disconcert, I suppose. But it's what makes that particularly kind of rock and rolly sound that the Stones have so good. And I'm saying it because that means the guys are not playing on the nose. So it's not super precise. And then that opens up something in how we receive it that hits us in a different place and makes it more enjoyable or richer or more vibrant. If I go back to CODA, nothing wasn't on the nose. Now, the only thing you could say is you're watching 3 deaf actors communicate through sign language 100% of the time. And that, I suppose, was a kind of a novelty. Although recalling from a year or two earlier, that movie with Riz Ahmed as the heavy metal drummer losing his hearing, which also had an acclaimed supporting actor role with his kind of deaf mentor in that. That guy's name, I can't remember. Was it Paul Acuni or something like that? What was the name of that movie? The Sound of Metal. Was that it? That is, I thought, I felt that was a very original story and had a really extraordinary soundscape, like the soundtrack. No, I'm not talking about the songs, but the sound editing, the effect of the sound in that movie to convey this loss of hearing. I just thought it was so brilliantly done and quite unsettling. Ultimately, the story wasn't quite... I didn't find it quite satisfying, but a great performance by Riz Ahmed. And again, interesting that you'd have a couple of movies in a couple of years, but deafness as a key aspect of the plot and storytelling. So I was going to say that maybe that was the only thing that was a little bit, out of sync, I suppose, with normal storytelling, and that was interesting. But yeah, after watching it, I just thought, okay, so I actually wouldn't hesitate to say you should see it. That's the truth, because as I'm recalling it now, it's worth watching just for the kind of the nice acting performances, and that might be enough just to go on the journey with those nice people and see where it ends up. and it's a nice, heartfelt story with a lot of sincerity, and I don't really have an issue with that. But I guess I feel anyone could have made that movie, and that's not to be absolutely horrible to the director, because it's not easy to get a movie made. But I didn't feel there was anything like distinctive cinematically or from like a movie storytelling point of view. There was nothing distinctive about that movie. However, if I had to choose between another unbelievably mediocre movie and had to choose between it and CODA, I'd choose CODA every day of the week. The movie I'm thinking of is Bohemian Rhapsody from a few years ago, with Rami Malek playing Freddie Mercury in the kind of the Freddie Mercury story. And that was a sort of, that was like an authorised autobiography, or an authorised biography, in that I think it had Queen's blessing. But I was astonished at how mediocre that movie was, even though Rami Malek gave a great performance. And yeah, I mean, whatever. But that movie I found offensively unimaginative, unoriginal. To me, it was like I don't know. It was just so uninteresting. The whole bloody thing. It was like the director, and I can't even remember who directed it. Someone who was attached to it and then wasn't on it anymore. Was it Bryan Singer? But that movie was like someone had never, ever seen a biopic before and thought they were the first person to do it, and just telling the story in a completely unimaginative, unoriginal way, chronologically. It was just, I don't know, it was just kind of naff and not very interesting at all. And I still can't believe that it didn't win Best Picture, did it? Did it win Best Picture over A Star Is Born? My cherished A Star Is Born, the Lady Gaga Bradley Cooper movie, which I still think, a few duff sequences here and there, notwithstanding, is a terrific movie. Really, really good. Anyway, so that's kind of the mediocre thing. I'm going to throw in one more movie into this mediocre discussion, because my daughter was home sick from school on Monday, and we sat down to watch a movie on Monday afternoon just to chill out, and I was enjoying just spending time with her after being very busy over the last couple of months. And we sat down and watched The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which I think is 10 years old now, and that is directed by Ben Stiller, and of course it's based on the James Thurber short story from eons ago, which was that made into a movie with Danny Kaye? I feel I've got an image of Danny Kaye in my mind. And I'd seen The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, the Ben Stiller version, a couple of times, and I'd shown it to students because it's kind of an easy watch and it's kind of effortless. But the more I was watching it the other day, and my daughter was quite engaged, but not sufficiently engaged to watch it with great attention from start to finish. And in fact, she was more inspired by the way Life magazine is featured in the movie. She was inspired by that to reach for a book from our bookshelf at home, which is fundamentally a collection of all the great Life photographs. I'm sure you might be familiar with that book. So as she was watching the movie, she was flicking through this book of amazing photography, and we were sort of talking about the photographs in the book and different figures who came up in it. But that movie is too long, and there's no way of shaking the feeling by the end of it that it is just this ludicrous Ben Stiller vanity project. And I actually don't know anything about what Ben Stiller's like off camera. He's obviously been pretty prolific and had a very successful career. And I've enjoyed certain of his acting performances. Maybe my favourite acting performance from Ben Stiller is his cameo in Anchorman, when he turns up as a sort of a Hispanic gang leader in this kind of pastiche of a West Side Story like gang melee. I think just that little glimpse of him being a hard ass gang leader is hilarious. He's also yeah, other ones come to mind, but anyway. And maybe if you're a guy who has played comic characters, comic relief, doofuses, comic grotesques, comic idiots, a la his character in Zoolander, or maybe even his sort of loser, loser's probably a bit harsh, his character, the put upon Greg Fokker in Meet the Parents, or the grotesque gym owner he plays in Dodgeball. When you've played those characters, maybe you're yearning for an almost conventional romantic lead, leading man arc. And I think that's what he did. He indulged himself enormously in Walter Mitty. But there was something about it. It just lacks life. It lacks spontaneity, which is ironic considering it's all about Life magazine and Life the metaphor, to go out and seek adventure and daring do and broadening one's horizons. And he does go on that journey literally and figuratively, and ultimately gets the girl he wants. And there are sequences that are quite cute and some sequences that are quite funny, but ultimately, you just can't shake the feeling that it's taking itself entirely too seriously. There's this kind of heavy sincerity and weight to Walter Mitty's plight as played by Ben Stiller, like this kind of lonely, sad, depressed, grief-stricken man. Who is ultimately acclaimed as sort of totally, integral to the success of the magazine by the magazine's renegade photographer, played quite funnily by Sean Penn. But yeah, again, I came away from that movie thinking, okay, so it's kind of nice to look at. And it's certainly well made, and it certainly has a visual style. I think Ben Stiller's probably quite a very good movie maker. And yet, I came away feeling like I'd watched an overlong Apple commercial. And anyone who knows me, I don't know if I've had my Apple rant before on the podcast, but I'm not a big fan of Apple. I think they epitomize the most manipulative side of advertising, and devises products as symbols of status and symbols of lifestyle and symbols of kind of the culture of cool, which I find you're just so phony. That's what I find myself resisting. Like everyone in Apple advertising is, very diverse, good looking, alternative, creative, and they always do things at the magic hour. It's either sunrise or sunset, and they're always living in cool places, and I just detest all of it. I detest all of it with a passion. Now you might go, well, what's the alternative? Putting some unattractive person, in a dank, under-furnished flat under rain clouds, because those people use Apple products too. I'd find it more believable, I suppose, but just don't sell me cool. Don't sell me cool. I can't stand it. And Ben Stiller didn't help himself by using, I think it was Jose Gonzalez's music in the movie as well. So there's that, and it all becomes this kind of elevator pablum. So it kind of made me sad watching it, because I feel like Ben Stiller is more talented than that. And he's like, screw you. I'm sure Ben Stiller's really upset by my critique. Now, I've spent far too long talking about mediocrity. But another movie I watched, two other movies I watched. Roman Polanski's Repulsion from 1965. Holy hell. What a movie. Such a 60s movie and set in London, which feels so appropriate. I think it was his first English language movie. I think it was his first movie after Knife in the Water, which was this kind of breakout movie, which is, that was in Polish, wasn't it? Yeah, that was it. And that's an interesting movie to watch as well. But Repulsion is really interesting, and it's such an interestingly shot movie, and again, such a distinctive cinematic voice announcing itself to English language cinema at that time, and very, I don't know, very sort of audaciously subverting the whole swinging 60s idea by centering the story on a beautiful young woman who is repulsed by sex and lives with a sister who isn't, and fundamentally descends into a psychotic state as her response to her sense of sex being all around her and her sense of being desired and being objectified, and she kind of almost sleepwalks through the movie in a catatonic state of internal trauma as she's wrestling with her demons, her memories, and her sense memories, and she starts to have hallucinations and starts to believe she's being sexually assaulted and descends into a state of kind of self-neglect. But it's just a disconcerting, unsettling movie that, again, that's very dated as well in terms of it's got such a 60s feeling, and it's the way people speak, it's the sort of the mode, the way they speak in terms of the language they use, but also the sort of the cadence of those particular accents, the style. It's again very much of its moment. And then just to add to the sort of slightly off-kilter thing, Polanski cast two French women as the sisters. Now, I've forgotten the sister's name, but the main actress, the main character, was played by a young Catherine Deneuve, who I think was only in her early 20s at that stage. And yeah, it's just such confident storytelling, such absolute certainty in what he was trying to depict, and the movie starts with a close-up of the protagonist's eye, and it finishes with another close-up of another eye. And I suppose what I took away from that was this is all about subjectivity. It's all about the subjective nature of experience. And this is something I've talked about on and off for over the lifetime of the podcast, and even dedicated episodes to it. But subjectivity is never, well, I suspect, because thankfully I haven't been in that situation, although I could speak about it from a depression point of view. But the subjectivity of someone whose mind is unraveling must be such a frightening place to be, such a frightening experience. Now, I've had people close to me who've been in altered states and in the grip of psychosis, and it's very unsettling to be in the company of those people, and to have a strong sense that they are experiencing reality in a radically different way to you. But I think that's what Polanski was saying with that. You know, we're going to get inside this young woman's viewpoint, and I'm going to show you how she sees the world and how she's experiencing this horrific period in her life. And then there's just little Polanski touches. And maybe the most obvious one in the movie. And I mean, just go and seek this out. I'm sure if you can't get it online, you'll get it. Where would you get it? DVD. It's out there. You'll get it. But one of the most obvious ones is there's a skinned and gutted rabbit that has been prepared for cooking, but which is abandoned as the older sister was going to cook it, and then she goes away for the weekend, and the younger sister never takes it upon herself to either cook the rabbit or to dispose of it. So it's just left sitting out on a plate to be eaten by flies. And there's just something off-putting, grotesque, and very visceral about seeing the rabbit, because Polanski's camera lingers on it intermittently throughout the movie. And I when I'm watching movies and they're being shown stuff like that, I always think of the smell. What would that smell like? Because where the movie's set in a particularly hot period of the summer in London, and people are, sweating and roasting, and I'm just thinking about that rabbit going off in the heat. And there's something in the Polanski vision that he's always had an instinct for the unsettling, and that's not accidental, is it? It comes from somewhere. And in fact, a brilliant book I read at the start of last year, and I'm sure I spoke about it at the time, it's The Big Goodbye by Sam Wasson. That's Wasson, and that is a terrific book which documents the kind of coming into being of the movie Chinatown and the relationship between Jack Nicholson and Robert Towne, the writer of Chinatown, and Roman Polanski, the director of Chinatown. Of course, Jack Nicholson was the actor in it. That Chinatown is a masterpiece. And if you have to pick a movie that is a tribute to film noir, and a movie that is made in the 70s that captures the absolute disillusionment with the establishment, like so many of the new Hollywood movies did, but it's been made by a Polish emigre who at this stage is on the other side of the Manson family murders that fell upon his young pregnant wife Sharon Tate. He's also, I'm sure that the sex scandal, the underage sex scandal was known at this time as well. Polanski had a lot of baggage, and what the book makes really clear, it's a really virtuosic book, and it takes you again into the mind of these big Hollywood players. But Polanski lost one, if not both parents, to the horrors of the Holocaust. And so that is in his makeup, the belief that, the belief that good things are going to be taken away, the belief that the horrors of life will be visited upon you. And of course, very tragically, that came back to came back to be shown to be very true to him in the murder of Sharon Tate. And so when you look at Polanski films, that's in the mix. And that essential darkness is in the mix. And that commitment to telling stories that unsettle and scare and hint at the horrific, that hint at the darkness within humans, and that hint at our essential vulnerability. And if you take a movie like Chinatown, where we go on the journey with this very dogged, determined private eye, as played by Jack Nicholson, and his belief that he is doing good work, to uncover something very dark and devious, and that he is going to get to the bottom of it successfully, and as a result of that, perhaps do right by the beautiful Faye Dunaway. And all his work is horrifically undone, stymied, and hurled into kind of meaninglessness in the final scenes of the movie. And it's really, really, really dark. It's the ultimate sour note and the very opposite of a happy ending. And you have to put that into a context of the horrendous experiences in Polanski's personal life. And the only thing I'm going to say in terms of what he allegedly did to an underage woman, is that I've always been sort of repulsed by that story and found it very disturbing. But it doesn't, I don't think it certainly detracts from Roman Polanski as a man, but it doesn't detract from his work. And I don't see how that plays out in his work. And I mean, maybe this is a whole other quite uncomfortable conversation, but I think I suppose my fundamental belief is, and I mean, I'd have to speak to women about this really, but I think a lot of men compartmentalize their sexual lives, and they compartmentalize their sexual urges and their sexual impulses, and therefore create a separation, like it lives in a different place. And that's not to say that the male gaze can be very invasive, and cynical and dishonest as used by male directors. And maybe someone like Stanley Kubrick comes to mind in terms of how his lens lingered on the female form. But Polanski, I feel, I don't know, I'm trying to think of his other movies. I feel he's not really guilty of that. Yeah. But anyway, Repulsion. Yeah. Just, I mean, it must have been just staggering at the time. I mean, don't forget, this is the guy who also brought us Rosemary's Baby, another movie I've only watched once. I mean, I might revisit that if I'm feeling brave. I always found that's a very disturbing movie as well. But very, very effective. But again, the darkness. And I mean, that's more conventionally a horror movie, I suppose, in terms of a cult of, you know, devil worshippers allowing Mia Farrow to be impregnated by Satan, in a very disturbing dream sequence that turns out not to be a dream at all. Yeah, brilliantly done. So anyway, Polanski, a singular visionary, artistic talent, and very, very dark, very nasty. And of course his cameo in Chinatown he plays a nasty little character who famously slices open Jack Nicholson's nose, because Jack Nicholson's been very nosy, and he just and rips through the soft fleshy part of the nose by sticking the blade up the nostril and flicking it out. It's a great little sequence, and he's just like this tiny nasty little guy. Now, to go from nastiness, and in a way, this next director, and I've got about maybe 15 minutes left to speak about this. Maybe this next director is the polar opposite of Polanski, in that he is the ultimate happy ending guy, and a director who finds the light and loves the light and loves the magic and the wonder and the awe that can be found in life, and the magic and the wonder and the awe that can reside in very ordinary people. And I am talking about Steven Spielberg, whose movie The Fabelmans I caught recently. So The Fabelmans, if you don't know, is fundamentally Spielberg's, it's not his life story, but it's the story of his kind of coming of age as a kid, and kind of the early stages of his maturation into, I'm going to be a movie maker. And it's kind of a love letter to his youth and his journey and his family, until he found himself sitting face to face with one of the all-time great Hollywood directors for a very funny final scene and final moment of the movie. And I suppose Fabelman is just another version. Like, I mean, if it doesn't sound immediately obvious to you, let's just say, Fabelman sounds like a Jewish name, and instead of just calling it the Spielbergs, and if you think Spiel is a story, he just, with the writer, playwright and screenwriter Tony Kushner, with whom he also collaborated on what I thought was a brilliant West Side Story from a couple of years ago, they went, let's just call this guy Fabelman. So it's like, and you hear that and you can't help but go, oh, story man, storyteller. And I had never thought of it before in that way until thinking about it in these terms. But it is a case of nominative determinism. Spielberg, I'm going to be the guy who tells great spiels. And it's a really, the movie itself, I don't know if I'd say it's one of Spielberg's great movies, but it is a great movie. And he is a great storyteller and a great visual storyteller. And he is essentially such a positive, benign storyteller that you always come away with a sort of a bit of a sense of kind of human uplift. And I did hear him speaking about the movie on the podcast Smartless, and he just comes across so well, such a sort of he must be very comfortable in his skin at this stage, seeing as he's this kind of older, one of the kind of one of the kind of elite Hollywood elders. I mean, it's basically the new Hollywood generation as the old granddads of Hollywood now, because he would have been a contemporary of Scorsese and Coppola and De Palma, Paul Schrader, and others. And if you read Peter Biskin's Hollywood kind of trash epic, Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, is that what it's called? He doesn't depict, George Lucas would have been in that mix of directors as well. He kind of depicts Spielberg as a bit kind of nebbishy and not really a hit with the ladies and not particularly cool. But like, again, as much as I've enjoyed that book, the couple of times I've read it, it is very salacious. It is, I don't say it's mean-spirited, but it's a bit too willing to kind of stick the knife in. And Spielberg is, I feel he's kind of condescended to almost in that, because he's not, he's not maverick enough or ballsy enough or badass enough in the way maybe some of those other directors were, and some maybe himself and George Lucas were slightly outliers in that they each clearly were much more committed to an idea of commercial cinema and commercial storytelling, which I don't think makes them any less talented or any less interesting as subjects of kind of discussion. And I was certainly a big Spielberg guy growing up by virtue of being in the absolute target audience for movies like E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind to a lesser extent, which was, I guess, not really a kid's movie. Although I remember being taken to the cinema to see that by my aunt and uncle. That's my uncle who passed away recently. And finding it sort of beguiling and haunting and sort of awe-inspiring, just I think because of the atmosphere and the visuals, and going on this journey with Richard Dreyfuss. But it was actually one of the kids in the movie who is, I think, is he disappeared early on, or does he see these aliens or the UFOs early on in the movie? And I remember that stayed with me for ages afterwards. Just what I felt was the sort of innate vulnerability of the child being exposed to something huge and alien and unknowable, and the child's kind of fearlessness, which put the child in danger. This little blonde boy, in the early scenes of that movie, you can see that. But yeah, E.T., Close Encounters, and then Raiders of the Lost Ark, which, I mean, just couldn't have, knocked my socks off more as whatever I would have been then, an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, who already loved Han Solo, and then to see him as Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford playing him as Indiana Jones. I just thought, this is great. It just doesn't get any better than this. And you've heard me refer before on the podcast to Steven Soderbergh, the director, hailing Steven Spielberg as one of the great visual storytellers, and having such faith in that idea that Steven Soderbergh put up a version of Raiders of the Lost Ark on his own website in black and white as a silent movie, just with a music soundtrack to it, and saying you can watch the movie and understand everything, just going scene to scene to scene, because Spielberg is such a great visual storyteller. And there's more of that great visual storytelling evident in the Fabelmans, and it really is, it's kind of lovely. It's kind of a lovely movie, and it's one I will revisit, because it's just capturing this journey of falling in love with movies, which I can relate to, but I've never had any capacity or particular inclination to try and make movies. But again, vicariously, you go on that journey through this young Spielberg proxy, who was, lovely, a really charming performance by, I don't know, again, this young actor I'd never seen before, but he was very, very good. What was his name now? Oh, Gabriel LaBelle. Anything to Patti LaBelle? He's white, so maybe not. And great performances from Paul Dano and Michelle Williams as the Spielberg parents. And apparently they're very close. They're very close renditions of his parents, because he spoke on that Smartless podcast about the kind of overwhelming impact of seeing them present in character as his proxy folks when he was making the movie. But yeah, really, really nice. A very funny performance by Judd Hirsch in one key scene or one key sequence in the movie as well. And yeah, like Spielberg, I've definitely accused him of this as well. His indulgence in kind of schmaltziness or sentimentality detracts from some of his great achievements. And uses it as he's guilty of it in his framing device for Saving Private Ryan, and also to an extent in Schindler's List. But they're two of the greatest movies ever made. I mean, I don't think anyone's ever captured the Holocaust experience, the kind of the taking of, was it Warsaw, and then the horrors of the concentration camps. No one has ever really captured them in the same way. And again, it's just it's the visual storytelling. And of course, Schindler's List has that two great performances, really. Like Liam Neeson is excellent in that, but Ralph Fiennes as the sort of psychotic senior Nazi officer overseeing the concentration camp, and just randomly executing the Jewish prisoners as they cross the yard. It just fierce stuff. So yeah, I don't know. Look, I'd like to talk more. I might have to revisit. I might have to revisit Spielberg's his oeuvre, but unfortunately I've run out of time. But again, singular vision. Jaws, which I was too scared to watch as a kid, definitely in my top 10. Definitely in my top 10. Not top 10 Spielberg movies, top 10 movies altogether. I might even take that over. If I had to choose only one Spielberg movie, if I was only allowed to keep one, I think Jaws would be it. I think masterful storytelling, and he was so bloody young when he did that. But just his control of the storytelling, of suspense, and his great gift with actors and child actors. Great child actor director. If you look at the scenes, the dinner scenes in Jaws with Roy Scheider and his kids, brilliant. And if you look at the early scenes in E.T., Elliot, his brother, with his mother in the table when they first hear the dog growling and going out into the garden, and Elliot finding E.T. out there. But that early scene around the dinner table and one of the sons letting it slip that their father is seeing somebody else, they're broken up. It's just brilliant. I don't know. Yeah, he just had a feel for it. And maybe if you watch the Fabelmans, you'll get a sense of where that came from. That ability to relate to vulnerable kids. I don't know. Anyway, look, that's it. That's all I've got. I'll be back with more next week. And take it easy. Check out those movies. Even the mediocre ones. They have their place, but it's a singular vision. That's what we want, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, mind yourselves. Thanks for listening. Really appreciate it. And I'll talk to you soon. All the best. Bye.